Oh, hi. The average apartment rent in Seattle rose 8.3% in the past year. That's a lot, no doubt about it. It beats inflation and it beats wage growth. So, some in the media and special interest groups take to calling this a problem of skyrocketing rents, a crisis, an emergency. Well, let me say this about that. That type of hyperbole is misleading at best, and it is dishonest at worst. First, that 8.3% increase compares the average rents in Seattle last year with the average rents in Seattle this year. That sounds fine, but there is a problem with that because developers have opened a lot of new units in the past 12 months, and those new units typically rent for more because they have more features, more amenities that consumers want. And so these higher rents in new construction tends to distort the overall rent trend, and it implies that all rents are going up by that amount, but they're not. So when you look at rent trends over the past year and you exclude the new units that developers added in the last 12 months, you'll see that rents didn't go up 8.3%, they only went up 7.5%. Now I say only, 7.5% is still a very large rent increase. But at least now we're comparing apples to apples. Step two, we need to look at rent trends over time. Looking at what happened in the last 12 months is just a snapshot. Now, snapshots are useful, but taking the longer term view really fills in the full story. Back in 2000, the average rent in Seattle was $792. This spring, it was $1,266. Now, that's a significant increase, but this chart shows that rents do go up, but sometimes they go up at a much slower rate, sometimes faster, and sometimes they even go down. What happens to rents depends on a lot of things, not the least of which is the economy and the amount of competition there is from new supply coming into the market. Now, instead of just looking at the rent trend, how many dollars rents were each year over the last 15 years, it's useful to look at the rate of change in rents on an annual basis. How much have rents gone up every year? You can see from this chart, it's been quite a roller coaster ride, and that's pretty typical. So sometimes rents are going up at a fairly high rate, sometimes at a more moderate rate, sometimes barely at all, and sometimes they even go down. Now, this phenomenon just didn't begin to appear 15 years ago. It's been going on for a long time. Here's a look back at rent changes on an annual basis over almost the last 40 years. Now, this isn't for the city of Seattle. This is for King County overall, and we haven't filtered out the distortion created by new construction. Well, why didn't we do those things? Well, lazy, I guess. This information was readily available for this quick video, but it still points out a very important story. You can look over the long term and you can see that there are periods of time when we've seen rent growth in the 6 to 8% range, like we've seen in the last couple of years. There are also periods of time when rent growth has been much lower or even negative. So this is a phenomenon that's been going on forever. Real estate is truly a cyclical market. Rents are cyclical, like so many other things in our economy, in part because of our economy. Okay, getting back to Seattle, we talked about the overall rent trend. This chart shows that that rent trend pretty much plays out for all the different bedroom types in the market, from studios to 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, and 3-bedroom apartments. The bottom line, over the past 15 years, rents rose in Seattle just under 3.2% a year. They rose a little faster than that in studio apartments, but they rose a little slower than that in 2- and 3-bedroom apartments. Now, to put those rent numbers in a little bit of perspective, apartment investors also have to pay the bills. And since 2000, real estate taxes have gone up 6.3% a year, and utilities have gone up 5% a year, much higher than the rate of rent increase we've seen in that same period of time. Why do I focus on real estate taxes and utilities? Well, they're probably the most important expenses an apartment investor has. They make up almost half of total operating expenses. Now, don't get us wrong. There is a crisis, but it is not a crisis of skyrocketing rents. It is a crisis of skyrocketing hyperbole. It is a crisis of disinformation, which leads to bad decisions. How unfortunate for the entire community. I hope that you enjoyed today's video and you'll come back next week for another weekly apartment update.